Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I'm here to help you finish your Christmas shopping list and let everyone else over there stiff-arm their competition while trying to fight off that tryptophan on Turkey Night. Now, what we did was we partnered with Rochester Sports Autographs, the largest JSA authenticated autograph distributor in the United States, where you can get up to 75% off over 30,000 autographed sports collectibles during this holiday season. They have something for everyone. But how is RSA able to offer such great deals on JSA authentication, you ask? Well, they do this by making deals directly with athletes so there are no extra markups, and they choose to then pass that savings on to you, the customer. Now, all orders from Rochester Sports Autographs are top quality and shipped to your door with top authentication and a money-back guarantee. But hurry up because customers are so stark raving mad for RSA that memorabilia sells out daily. All you have to do is head over to shoprsa.com/SHN. Again, that's shoprsa.com/SHN. So don't wait to bring home your favorites and own a piece of sports history for you and the loved ones on your shopping list this holiday season. This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
The Rose Bowl. The game that inspired the college football bowl season has a long and storied history. The stadium itself is 100 years old, and in celebration of it, Pigskin Dispatch is assembling some of the top historians and authors to share the memories, people, and events that make the granddaddy of them all the special game that it is. Enjoy this Rose Bowl memory from pigskindispatch.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal of positive football history. And we are talking about the Rose Bowl this month and the history of the great game and all the aspects and people around it. And we have a very knowledgeable historian and author who's written a couple books on football, and some have some Rose Bowl information in it. And that's Timothy P. Brown of Football Archaeology. Tim Brown, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, Darren. Thank you. I hope neither you nor your listeners are bored out of their minds or tired of listening to me. But hey, let's give it a shot and see what we can, what kind of punishment we can put them through.
Hey, they're the alternative is they'd be listening to me, and they listen to me every day of the year. So they it's a refreshing to get another voice that's much more knowledgeable than I am, and especially about this history of the Rose Bowl. You've been on a couple times talking about some great Rose Bowl aspects, and you have a great topic tonight as we're going to go into the 1920s and talk about some Rose Bowl there.
Yeah. So I guess we're going to chat a bit about the 1920 Rose Bowl, which ultimately was played by Harvard and Oregon. And so, I kind of touched on this in the past, but this is still in the period where what we now call the Ivies, that league didn't form till like 1953, but Brown had been in the 16 Rose Bowl, then Penn in 17. We had the two War years, and now all of a sudden Harvard is playing in the 1920 game. And so, it kind of follows, this obviously 1920 followed the War years, right? But that had a couple of implications. One was just that. There had been 2 years where a lot of college students had either volunteered or been drafted and had entered the military. And then all those guys mustered out and were back on campus. So, there was a lot of talent on the 1920 teams, or a lot of competition for spots, because you kind of had 6 years worth of players on what would normally be a 4-year team. So just in general, it was quite a quite a competitive time. And you had on both teams, a lot of these guys were had been in the military. So everybody on the Harvard team that year had been in uniform during the 1918 season. Now, some of them were on campus in an SATC role, but there were a bunch of others that served overseas. Their captain, Bill Murray, was an ensign on the USS San Diego that was either hit a mine or was torpedoed off of Long Island and sunk. So a lot of these guys are guys who had been through some things, and even the coaches. 3 of the Harvard coaches were veterans and had been over in France. So you got a lot of things like that going on. It was also 1919 was the 50th season. Well, I guess it was 51st season of football. Assuming that if you accept that the Princeton Rutgers game was the first football game. So,
maybe we'll just say it's the 51st season of organized intercollegiate athletics. How's that sound? This might be better.
Well, yes. So anyways, Harvard goes through and has a successful season, and they get and take an invitation, accept the invitation to play, and they end up meeting an Oregon team that I said in some of the earlier episodes, especially the one about the World War I Rose Bowls. There are a lot of guys who played for Oregon who were on either Camp Lewis or the 2 Mare Island teams. And so some of these guys, there were 2 or 3, maybe even 4 guys who were on 3 separate Rose Bowl teams, or who played in 3 Rose Bowls, because they played in the 17 Oregon game. They played in either 18 or 19 on one of the military teams. Then they were back at Oregon in 20, or for the 20 Rose Bowl, right? And 3 of Oregon's starters that year, in the 20 Rose Bowl, were started in 17 Rose Bowl, and then 4 of their starters had been in the Rose Bowl before, right? Either with the military team or with Oregon. So, anyways, both teams, pretty experienced groups of guys, guys who had been through some things. So it's just an unusual set of circumstances. But the game itself, Harvard was kind of anybody who watched the game would have come away saying, Harvard was the more powerful team. They were the bigger team, but they just they looked a bit ponderous. They weren't in the same kind of shape as Oregon was. But unfortunately for Oregon, their top player, a guy named Steers, who had played for Mare Island the year before, he was knocked unconscious early in the game and didn't return. So that they kind of struggled without him. He was also, as often was the case, he was their kicker as well. And so, the game ends with Harvard wins 7-6. So it was, that was a big deal because the Eastern or Ivy team had lost in 1916 and 1970. So now Harvard goes out there and shows the rest of the country how it's really done, right? And they, they win the game. So, but I view it as kind of okay that it was kind of the death knell of the Ivy type teams as being the premier football teams in the country. Columbia ends up in the Rose Bowl in like 34, and I'm missing somebody, but there's another team that that plays in the 20s. But it was kind of a little bit of the end of an era, right? I mean, they just there would still be really good teams, here and there. I mean, Cornell had some great teams in the 20s, and Princeton had some great teams with Kazmaier and some of those guys, but, the Big Ten, the Pacific Coast teams, and then in the 20s and 30s, you saw the real rise of Southern football, and then become, every bit as competitive as anybody else, right? So it kind of marked a little bit of the end of an era, as far as that's concerned.
Sort of the end of them being the dominant, East Coast teams, the Yales, Penns, and Harvards and Princetons of the world that dominated football so much that first, 40, 50 years of football.
Yeah.
Sort of that era dropping off. Yeah. Pretty significant.
Yeah, people don't think about it, but, or don't realize it, but it's actually something I mentioned in Field of Friendly Strife. But in the Penn was the biggest school in the country when the U.S. entered World War I. I mean, you don't
Really?
think of them that way, but
No.
several of the Ivy type schools were among the biggest. Wisconsin was a big school, Michigan was a big school, and Cal was a big school, but a lot of schools were pretty darn small. Oregon only had 800 students in 1917. So, a lot of these schools were small. And then the Ivies just never really, they never ramped up. Penn's pretty big, but, you think about the size of some of the big state schools, and those really started growing in the 20s, and then especially after World War II. So, the Ivies didn't follow that path, right? And so they didn't have access to the same level of talent in the non-scholarship eras and all that kind of stuff. And so, they just, and then philosophically, there were some things going on too, obviously, but, they just weren't, they just, here and there, they'd be competitive because they had some great athletes, but they just never were quite the same. They lost the dominance that they had.
Huh. Very interesting. Well, all good things must come to an end. And Tim, why don't we take this opportunity to share with the listeners where they can get information from your football archaeology site?
Yeah. So it's just, go to the site. It's footballarchaeology.com. You can either just, browse through it. There's a search function to, if you're looking for a specific topic. You can also subscribe, and you can subscribe for free, or there's paid subscriptions. But just if you subscribe for free, you're going to get a daily email with a tidbit that shows up at 7:00 Eastern every night in your inbox, and a couple of other articles that'll pop up in the course of a month as well. Or you can follow me on Twitter. Just find Football Archaeology, not the guy in England who looks at football stadiums over there, the other kind of football, but the one with the old looking helmet, and you'll find me. So so follow me on Twitter if that makes you happier.
All right. Tim Brown, historian, author, and becoming quite the podcaster now, being on shows quite often. So we appreciate you coming in here and sharing the Rose Bowl history and football history with us once again. So thank you very much, sir.
Always a blast. Thank you, sir. And Merry Christmas.
All right, you too.
Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. A special thanks to the talents of Mike and Jean Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, And I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website, seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.